Now, we in Chapter 9, Farming Pollution. There are several types of farming activities. The first one is agriculture. Agriculture is the single largest user of freshwater resources, using a global average of 70% of all surface water supplies. Except for water lost through evapotranspiration, agricultural water is recycled back to surface water, or groundwater. Agriculture is both cause and a victim of water pollution. It is a cause through its discharge of pollutants and sediment to surface or groundwater, through net loss of soil by poor agricultural practices, and through salinization and waterlogging of irrigated land. It is a victim through the use of wastewater and polluted surface and groundwater, which contaminate crops and transmit disease to consumers and farm workers or animals. Agriculture exists within a symbiosis of land and water and, as FAO makes quite clear, appropriate steps must be taken to ensure that agricultural activities do not adversely affect water quality, so that subsequent uses of water for different purposes are not impaired. Manufacturers and farmers throughout the world discharge pollutants into hydrologic systems. Pollution may arise from agricultural practices, deforestation, and poor land management. Agricultural pollution comprises wastes, emissions, and discharges arising from farming activities. This includes runoff and leaching of pesticides and fertilizers, pesticide drift and volatilisation, erosion and dust from cultivation, improper disposal of animal manure and carcasses, livestock waste, oil, toxins from farm equipment, soil and sediment. Some agricultural pollution is a point source, meaning that it is derived from a single discharge point, such as a pipe. These figures show some examples of pollution derived from agriculture activities. These effects are counteracted and thereby aggravated by ever larger inputs of pesticides, insecticides, fungicides, herbicides, and chemical fertilizers, that are now producing negative returns, while increasing systemic pollution of the food chain. The increasing demand for food, due to the increasing global populations of humans and feedlot animals for meat, has led to genetic engineering that spread harmful systemic pollution worldwide simultaneously, causing the extinction of valuable indigenous crops. Undesirable agricultural practices are a major source of water pollution in the environment. This type of pollution occurs when rainfall or irrigation causes runoff from farm fields. The runoff often carries with it significant quantities of organic material, as well as chemical fertilizers and pesticides. As a result, these pollutants end up in estuaries and streams. Agricultural non-point source pollution is the leading source of water quality impacts to rivers and lakes. Nitrogen from fertilizers, manure, waste and ammonia turns into nitrite and nitrate and pollute the environment. High levels of these toxins deplete waters of oxygen, killing all of the animals and fish. Nitrates also soak into the ground and end up in drinking water. This figure shows the type of waste created by agricultural activities, such as animal wastes, fertilizer runoff, and sewage runoff. In higher concentrations, it can cause algae bloom and affect the whole ecosystem. Pesticides used to kill insects that feed on crops can cause much damage to the environment if used inappropriately. Excessive pesticides remain in the soil after sprayings, and are washed away by the rain that forces them to be absorbed into groundwater. The same problem also exists with the use of fertilizers. The problem of agricultural pollution is not simply felt in farming regions. Contaminants in rivers can be carried all the way to the ocean, and polluted air can be blown to other areas with denser populations. Runoff is water from rain, which is not absorbed and held by the soil, but runs over the ground and through loose soil. Agricultural runoff is water leaving from farm fields because of rain or irrigation. As runoff moves, it picks up and carries pollution, which it can deposit into ponds, lakes, coastal waters, and underground sources of drinking water. Polluted agricultural runoff is the leading source of water pollution in rivers and lakes. It can also trigger algae blooms in coastal waters, and produce dead zone in the ocean, where there is no oxygen and few fish or wildlife can survive. What is the effect of agricultural activities? The first one is to sediment. Place resource, or contaminant whose dual effect is to deplete the land from which it came, and impair the quality of the water it enters. Sedimentation can cause blockage of irrigation canals, dams, farm ponds, and impairs the oxygen balance in the water. Next is plant nutrients. Unwanted aquatic plants are nourished by plant nutrients, derived from agricultural runoff, feedlots, and barnyards, municipal and rural sewage, and industrial wastes. Aquatic plants can clog irrigation and drainage structures, and increase nitrates and nitrites in groundwater, which can poison humans and livestock. Next is inorganic salts and minerals. Inorganic salts and minerals can impair the quality of soil and water. Even a trace or essential such as boron, zinc, etc. is highly toxic. The organic wastes. Organic wastes emanate from municipal sewage, garbage, food processing industries, pulp mills, and the feedlot industries. In water, the oxygen level is depleted, or reduced to zero, producing septic conditions that make water unfit for crop irrigation or farmstead use. Infectious agents. This agent can be carried by the wind, water and soil. Bacteria and virus diseases of crops are spread by machines that move contaminated soil, insects, weed seeds, and irrigation water. Animal diseases transmitted by soil and water include leptospirosis, salmonellosis, hog cholera, mastitis, foot and mouth disease, tuberculosis, brucellosis, histoplasmosis, anthrax, coccidiosis, and many others. And the last one is chemicals waste. Organic chemicals in soil and water such as detergents, insecticides, herbicides, fungicides, rodenticides, fertilizers, adversely affect agriculture in many ways. Is there any solution? Several solutions can be practiced to minimize the impact on the environment. We can use fertilizers sparingly. Before that, we can test the soil to see the amount of fertilizer needed. Do not fertilize before a rainstorm or raining season. We can use organic fertilizers that release nutrients more slowly. We can recycle the oil, antifreeze, batteries, fertilizer, pesticides, and other chemicals and materials as much as possible. We can try to control and minimize runoff from exposed soil, feedlots, and barnyards so that it does not get into drinking water, streams and lakes. We can keep the barnyards and feedlots clean, and routinely pick up livestock waste, and dispose of it properly. Maintain proper storage of fertilizers, pesticides and other chemicals, and monitor containers for leaks. Lastly, we can maintain farm equipment and monitor for leaks. Use rags to soak up oils and other chemicals when making repairs. Never let any toxic materials flow into the ground, which in turn will go to groundwater. Pesticide is a composite term that includes all chemicals that are used to kill or control pests. This pesticide include herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, rodenticides, and depend on what organisms that farmers want to remove from their farm. A dramatic increase of global pesticide use in the year 1960 to 1970 resulted from the growing population and the need for increased food production. This table shows several types of pesticides and their toxicity impact on humans. The ecological effects of pesticide and other organic contaminants are varied and are often interrelated. The effects at the organism or ecological level are usually considered to be an early warning indicator or potential human health impact. What are the classification of pesticide? Pesticide can be classified according to physical and chemical natures, target species, and purpose of application. What are the target species? Herbicide, insecticide, or fungicide. The chemical nature: chlorinated, hydrocarbons, organophosphate, carbamate. Type of pesticide: insecticide for insect, fungicide for fungi, herbicide for weed, bactericide for bacteria, and rodenticide for rodent. Two sources of pesticide: synthetic pesticide and organic pesticide, which produced from animal or plant parts. Major pesticides based on chemicals are carbamates, organochlorines, organophosphates, thiocarbamates. Major types of pesticide effects are listed below. 1. Death or the organism. 2. Cancers, tumors on fish and animal. 3. Reproductive inhibition or failure. 4. Suppression of immune system. 5. Cellular and DNA damage. 6. Poor fish health. 7. Other physiological effects such as eggshell thinning. What the effect to humans? Human health effect are caused by skin contact when handling of pesticide products, inhalation by breathing of spray of dust, ingestion where pesticide consumed as a contaminant in food or water. Farm workers have special risks associated with inhalation and skin contact during preparation and application of pesticides. Degradation of water quality by pesticide runoff has two principal human health impact: by consumption of fish and shellfish, or direct consumption of pesticide-contaminated water.
Let's look what pollution create by aquaculture or mariculture activities.
The next topic is about aquaculture or mariculture pollution. Aquaculture is one of the huge industry, and the world's fastest growing food sector. It's worth a massive $56 billion globally, and provides 1/3 of the fish people consume. Farming of fish, shrimp, and shellfish is often viewed and marketed as a way to take pressure off wild fisheries and provide needed income to coastal communities. But some types of aquaculture are actually increasing pressure on several already threatened marine species. Those impacts depends upon the species being farmed. For example, oyster and clam farms have fewer impacts than shrimp and salmon farms, which in turn have fewer impacts than tuna farms. The detrimental impacts can be huge, and have even proven disastrous in some parts of the world. The impacts on local marine biodiversity can in turn cause problems for local communities that rely on marine resources for their livelihoods. What are the aquaculture impacts to our environment? As production rises, aquaculture's impacts on the environment and wild marine species such as pollution. Open-net cage fish farms and land-based fish farms can discharge significant amounts of wastewater, containing nutrients, chemicals, and pharmaceuticals, that impact on the surrounding environment. Nutrients in unused fish feed and fish feces can cause local algal blooms, or eutrophication. These blooms lead to reduced oxygen in the water, which in turn can lead to the production of ammonia, methane, and hydrogen sulfide, which are toxic to many aquatic species. Reduced oxygen can also directly kill marine life. Unlike mollusk farming, many species of fish depend on a diet of artificial feed in pellet form that feed them every day. Because not all the feed is eaten, a great deal of feed can reach the bottom, where it is eaten by the benthos, or decomposed by microorganisms. Many studies have implicated overfeeding in fish farms as the cause of changes in benthic community structure, because a high food supply may benefit certain organisms. This alteration of the natural food web structure can significantly impact the local environment. In addition, a wide range of chemicals is currently used in the aquaculture industry, mainly pharmaceuticals, such as antibiotics, and anti-fouling agents such as copper. Some of these chemicals are toxic to mollusks and crustaceans, and little is known about their broader ecological implications. The next is, it can cause eutrophication. A significant effect of intensive fish culture is eutrophication of the water surrounding the aquaculture activities. Fish fecal wastes combined with nutrients released from the breakdown of excess feed raise the nutrient levels above normal, creating an ideal environment for algal blooms. Moreover, most feed nowadays is formulated to contain more nutrients. Once algal die, they settle to the bottom, where their decomposition depletes the oxygen. Before die, there is the possibility that algal toxins are produced. Next, is competition for space. Aquaculture is in direct competition with natural marine habitats for space. Fish farms often need the shelter of bays and estuaries to avoid damage from storms and currents. In addition, farmed fish need good water quality, frequent water exchange, and other optimal environmental conditions. Unfortunately, these locations are also very often ideal for wild fish and other marine life. Both terrestrial and aquatic wildlife can lose their habitats through the building and operating of aquaculture facilities and accompanying infrastructure. For example, some European fish farms have been placed in the migratory routes of wild salmon, while in Asia and Latin America, mangrove forests have been cleared to make space for shrimp farms. The other impact is habitat damage and destruction. Many aquaculture practices, particularly coastal net cage and shrimp farming, located at the sensitive coastal habitat. Many mangrove forests have been cut down and replaced with farms that supply shrimp to Europe, Japan, and America. After a few years of intensive farming, the accumulation of waste products and chemical pollution forced the farmers to abandon their farm ponds, clear a new section of mangrove forest, and rebuild. This unsustainable cycle can impact local people and their ability to live in these areas. The negative impacts on the natural environment, more apparent than with shrimp farming, and the associated destruction of mangrove forests. For example, in Asia, Over 400,000 hectares of mangroves have been converted into brackish water aquaculture, for the rearing of shrimp. Escapes farmed fish. Aquaculture is one of the main ways that foreign marine species, from both exotic species and domestic forms of native species, are introduced to new areas. A huge number of farmed fish escape from their pens, and can even outnumber their wild species. Like other introduced species, these escaped farmed species are a serious environmental problem. They cause significant disturbances of natural ecosystems, and threaten local wild species in several ways. They can compete for food and habitat, displace indigenous species, and interfere with the life cycles of wild species. If the escaped farmed species have a survival advantage over wild species, they can drive local populations to extinction. Exotic species can also carry diseases, or parasites that can be lethal to native species. Escaped species that are able to breed with the wild stock, can lead to a dilution of the natural gene pool, and can affect the long-term survival and evolution of wild species. Aquaculture also can cause parasites and disease in the aquatic ecosystem. Aquaculture operations can spread parasites and disease to wild marine species. For example, the migration of wild salmon between fresh and saltwater normally keeps sea lice, a saltwater parasite, at the ocean. When the farmed salmon spend all year in coastal areas, which can increase their chances of getting parasites. More fish farms mean more hosts for parasites. Indeed, in some parts of northern Europe, sea lice numbers are now significantly higher as a result of millions of farmed fish in the sea. Wild fish can also be exposed to viruses and other diseases through the use of imported, unprocessed fish to feed farmed fish. This problem is particularly associated with farmed tuna, which are usually fed whole fish rather than processed fish pellets. Next is fish feed. Aquaculture is contributing to overfishing through the use of wild-caught fish as feed for farmed fish. Around 1/3 of the world's fish catch is used to produce fish meal and fish oil, both of which is used to make feed for farmed fish. Most farmed marine fish and shrimp species are carnivorous type. They are either fed whole fish or pellets made of fish meal and fish oil. In both cases, the fish used as feed are caught from the wild. The amount of feed needed for farmed fish and shrimp is staggering. For example, 22 kilograms of wild-caught fish to produce just 1 kilogram of farmed tuna. 2 kilograms of wild-caught fish to produce 1 kilogram of farmed marine shrimp. Many of the fish stocks used as feed, mostly from mackerel, herring, and whiting, which are already fished or over their safe biological limit. Aquaculture is actually contributing to the overfishing crisis that plagues the world's fisheries. The other problem is farming wild-caught fish. The failure to breed some species in captivity, such as tuna and eel, has led to the relatively new phenomenon of farming wild-caught fish. Tuna farming, for example, involves capturing wild tuna, and then fattening them in cages, mainly for exportation to Japan for sushi. Prior to year 1995, very little bluefin tuna was farmed this way in the Mediterranean. These days, more than half the catch is farmed. The growth of the farmed tuna industry has dramatically increased the number of bluefin tuna caught each year, from an already overexploited stock. Some of the tuna caught for farming are juveniles, which will not be able to reproduce in the wild and renew the wild stocks. This kind of fish farming has had a similarly devastating effect on wild bluefin tuna populations in southern Australia, as well as on European eel populations. Predator conflicts. The wild animals preying on farmed fish and shellfish are often culled. High concentrations of prey animals and waste food provided by aquaculture farms attract everything from wild seals, seabirds, and sharks to mollusks and crustacean. Mammals and birds can damage open net cages and mussel cultivation grounds, while bottom-browsing fish, starfish, and crabs prey on bivalves and sometimes cultured flatfish. This figure summarized the environmental risks of marine aquaculture. And same goes to this figure. That's all for this chapter. Thank you. Have a nice day.